like normal without having to be told this time. Um, so today we're going to be mostly talking about some logical fallacies and then a little bit about the final. If you have questions afterwards, I think about 5 or 6 people have emailed me their project ideas for simulation. If you have a couple of ideas after the meeting you want to talk, we can do that too. Yeah, especially those of you who don't have Excel, I really need those today, maybe tomorrow, because it doesn't take me a ton of time, but it's just one more thing on my plate right here at the end. So really focus on, let's get those done this weekend so I can knock them out for you. Today we are going to be, as I say, talking about some logical fallacies, and I'm going to, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do. I'm going to write them over here on this deal and go from there. So the ones that we're going to talk about, and these are not an exhaustive, they're not a full exhaustive list of them. It is a list of them, some that I'm going to talk about that I want you to know about and be comfortable with. Some of the more common ones. Maybe, there we go, cool. It'd be helpful if I was on the right deal. So the ones I really want to focus on are some of these. So, and in no particular order, the straw man argument. Okay. This one, you hear it frequently. People will talk about, people in politics use it, and they do. They use it all the time in politics. The thing that I think the place that it galls me more than anywhere else is when it's used in my personal life. Okay. So whether I do it to somebody else or whether they do it to me, I don't like it either way, to be honest with you. But it's that idea of taking what someone said okay, which is often true, but not always, but often true, and then twisting it. Okay, so for instance, you're talking to your wife, let's say, and you're saying something about her mother-in-law, her mother, which might very well be true. Okay, and let's just say that it was 100% true on your part. Okay, the wife comes back at you and takes what you said, twists it just a little bit to where it's wrong. Okay, making it wrong / indefensible, and then saying you are wrong / sometimes evil, bad, whatever it is. So in politics, we frequently go to evil, bad. All right, in our personal relationships, they twist. We twist it. I do it all the time too. I mean, it's not just, I'm not immune to it. It happens. You'll hear what you want to hear someone say. Sometimes you do it on purpose. Okay. Sometimes you do it on purpose. You take what they said and you twist it. Okay. And frequently in politics that happens. You know good and well what they said was what this is. Happens in the news too, oftentimes. The person will be quoted inappropriately. They'll cut a part of it out and make it sound like they said this. Then you're attacked for that, which is not what was said at all, or that wasn't the intent. Sometimes it's just because we, and especially in our everyday relationships, we're too close to something. It's too close to us. We're emotionally attached to it, and so when we hear what we thought we've heard, or what we expect the person to say, we react to that, and we react to what we thought we heard them say, and we attack them for that. We're attacking we call that, we're beating up a straw man, because that argument, the argument that you're making that they said is not true, but it's they can't defend it. So it's just like a poor little straw man just getting the daylights beat out of it. And again, so because the straw man got the crap beat out of it, that we take that and we say, see, I won, you're wrong. Okay. That is it's a logical fallacy, because you didn't take apart their argument piece by piece. You took apart an argument that they never made piece by piece. Okay. And that's where the fallacy occurs on the straw man. Okay. Everybody has this. Everybody does this. Pretty much. I've yet to meet a person who doesn't do most of these. Sometimes on purpose, and sometimes it's just what we do. Okay. Word of caution, don't point out to someone that you're close with that they're being illogical, okay? They don't like it. I don't like it. Everybody doesn't like it. I don't know anybody that doesn't like that when they're in a heated argument. Nobody likes them to be told that you're being illogical, okay? So don't ask me how I know that. But the straw man, it's classic. It happens all the time. Um, I used to go off on this in class a little bit more about some politics, and I would show you examples of different politicians doing them. I don't care anymore. I just don't care anymore. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. And as soon as I bring this up, some people are going, "Oh my God, that's my favorite politician. Never does this." Yes, they do. Yes, they do. My politics, that's those other guys. Yeah, they do it too. Everybody does it. Okay, but in today's politically charged world, it doesn't matter which side you're on. Yeah, you're all, well, that other sucker always does it. Yeah, they do too. Everybody does. So I just don't waste my time on it anymore. I've had too many meetings over the years where someone gets their little feelers hurt about something we said in class that wasn't even offensive at all. They just took it, again, what was said out of context, and it was never bad. It was just like, "Oh, look, here's a perfect example of this," and then, "Oh," so I just don't do it anymore. It's not worth my time. Ad hominem attacks is another one. As soon as I write this down and I tell you what it means, so this is a personal attack, you attack the person rather than their argument. Every attack, so personal attacks on the person, not their argument. Not their argument, or some people don't like to really get their idea of an argument, but the argument is just an idea. Okay? So you can't tell me that their idea is wrong. You have no way of proving their idea is wrong. So instead, you attack the person. Okay? And as soon as you say that, people are like, "Oh, it's that one guy." Yeah, he does it too. Yeah, sure he does. He's not the only one. Okay? So we do it in our personal lives. Okay? You heard something? Well, that person's just a bad person. I'm not listening to what they say. Look, you just did it. Okay? Calling someone this or that, and then you make a statement about them, therefore everything they said is bad. Yeah. Be careful of that. Just be aware it happens all the time. So remember, the idea with logic is you're laying out an argument, like as if you were in court. You're presenting a case. At the end, boom, I want my case to be true. Here's what I'm building all of my case on. Great. But if any one of those is a bad foundation or a bad piece as you're building it, the whole thing crumbles. That's the whole point. Now, obviously, when it comes to logic in a computer program, you have to be logical. My son the other day was doing a program, and I'm not a great programmer. I really hate it, to be honest with you, mostly because I am not logical. I am not. You'd think I am, and sometimes I am. But when it comes to my personal life, yeah. But so we're sitting there, we're talking the other day, and in this program is doing whatever it is what he's programming is not working right. And so I asked him a question. He's like, "Oh, you're right. That's what I did wrong." He made a logical misstep in the program, and he went back and fixed it, and that's great. But I have a hard time with that sometimes. But when we talk about these things in our personal lives, we're having discussions on a daily basis with your boss, your significant other, whoever. And again, we all bring baggage to the table. All right. And so then the question is simply, we typically want to be right. I mean, that's just nobody really wants to lose. And we often get emotionally heated into these deals. And that is where I find that most of the time where my illogicalness comes into play, where in whatever it happens to be, ad hominem isn't one that I use a ton. It's not my go-to. Okay. I catch myself doing straw mans from time to time, and I catch myself doing another one from time to time. I'll point it out when I get there. I'm not one to in any way, gloss over my problems. This one here, it's not my personal problem one typically. Okay. Appeal to ignorance is probably my least favorite one in terms of this one is typically used. It's typically used against people of religion or religious backgrounds. And the reason it's typically done that way is because this is how it goes. Okay. Because you can't prove something, one way, the other must be true. And so it's typically used against people of faith, for instance. Well, you can't prove there's God, therefore there isn't one, and things like this. That annoys me. What part of faith don't you grasp? Okay. If you could prove it, it really wouldn't be faith, in my opinion. Like, I can prove a baseball exists or something. I don't have to have faith in a baseball. And so that just kind of annoys me. The whole idea of that just bothers me. Other things of that nature come into play. You know, if you look this one up online, they'll say things like, well, just because you can't prove Martians exist, that means they probably, you know, they probably do, or whatever. You know what I mean? This, or they don't. I mean, because you can't prove they do, then they don't. Things like this are just kind of goofy. You oftentimes can't prove sweeping things because it's so far out there. Sometimes it's used the other way around as well. Sometimes your religious people will use it against evolution. You can't prove it's true, therefore because you can't prove it's true, therefore it's false. Um, it can be used a couple of different things both ways, but I find typically it's used against people of faith more often than not, and I find that just kind of weird. So just be aware, that's what it means. You can't prove something one way. So for instance, you can't prove God exists, therefore he doesn't. Okay. And just be aware that that one's out there. It's probably my least favorite of these. I don't do this one. That one, I've never seen that one come up, I don't think, in a true argument between people. A true argument being things like, talking to something about your boss, about something, or talking about something to your significant other. That one just rarely comes up. In politics, not as often. Um, Not as often, because typically people don't try to just state something and let it go. They'll try to everybody will bring in their statistics to the party. I love statistics, but I hate when people just screw with them so badly. So they'll say, look, this is a fact. And then what they'll try to do, and it is a fact, but then they'll try to assign a causation for why that's true. Okay. And so, like, for instance, you can look at crime statistics. Some people will try to make race the common factor in why that is. Other people will say it's racism that's the common factor in that. You're looking at the same exact set of numbers, okay? But no one will come to that with this idea of, well, we just don't know. And the difference would be is we have stats that, but what do the stats show? That's the question. And everybody has their own deal. So that's not an appeal to ignorance situation. And I rarely find that except in philosophical arguments, like typically about matters of faith. So that's the one that one shows up most often. False dilemma. This is the whole way that car salesmen or salesmen in general work, all right? It's now or never. You're with us or against us. In other words, there is no middle ground, okay? But again, in sales pitches, that's typically how it works. You got to go today. I got someone else coming to buy the car today, like in 5 minutes. You need to make up your mind now. I just laughed back in the day. I remember buying a car back in the day. Somebody was putting the pressure on me. I'm like, oh, well, see you later. Bye. And I just walked off. And he was then getting even more pressier. And I just, see you then. Well, I guess if it sells, good for you. Have a good day. That just doesn't really work on me too often. It doesn't. So yeah, I suppose if I had a chance to buy one of my dream cars, let's say a 69 Nova or something, super sport and a whole bit, okay, maybe it would appeal to me at that point. But for the most part, I'm kind of immune to this one. This one doesn't bother me too much, but a lot of people do. They get all excited because, hey, look, I have to make a choice right now. And it's not, you've been talked into, I have to make a choice right now. Okay. So that idea, sometimes it's true. Once in a while, there is a situation where, yes, it's right or it's wrong. You have to do this or you have to do this. But oftentimes, and in the case of sales, this is almost always universally true. It's not now or never. Okay. But that is how salesmen obviously do it. Okay. Politicians use this one too, obviously. That's not one that doesn't come up in politicians' things. Once in a while, you might see this in an interpersonal relationship, but not terribly often. Again, this one is huge in the sales marketing world. Okay. Slippery slope. Okay, it's the idea one little thing will lead to calamity. Okay, for instance, oh my God, you smoked a joint. Okay, in high school, oh, there goes your whole life is gone. Okay. Oh, if we pass this one law against you owning a howitzer, all right, therefore all gun laws will be restricted. Okay. Now, there are places where people then say that everything is a slippery slope, and that I will not abide. Okay, that I cannot abide. So, for instance, let's say, again, going back to the gun thing, you can't own a howitzer. Well, yeah, okay, duh. Or you can't own it personally, a tank that's capable of firing a gun. Okay, I'm fine with that. All right. Um, but when you start talking about, oh, we need to restrict this one gun or this one type of action or whatever, well, then it's getting to be a little trickier, because then what do those all have in common? They look a little different, but they all have the same internal components. See, that's not a slippery slope to say that this will lead to this or this could lead to that. So what we see a lot of times in politics, especially, is people will say that this or that is a slippery slope, and they will and so some person will come along on the other side and go, oh man, everything is not a slippery slope, and then you go, oh, maybe they're right. But sometimes there is the idea that if you make this one step, then everything else will follow after it. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. I know a lot of people that smoked weed in high school. Everybody I went to high school with, except me and one other person. We had a very small school, but they're all potheads. Some of them still are. Some of them are completely messed up. Others of them turn out to be just perfectly acceptable. So the idea that, hey, you smoke pot in high school, your whole life's going to go to hell, that's a complete slippery slope argument. Okay. And yet, by the same token, there are situations where a person who knows that this could lead to other things will say, hey, no, this isn't a slippery slope. You can't make everything into a slippery slope argument. But oftentimes there is the idea that this will lead to this, will lead to this, will lead to this. So that's why this one's a really tricky situation. Okay. Classic example of this, I think it's the Geico car commercials where, not Geico, which one is it? No, it's the TV cable commercial where the guy goes, something about your cable goes out or whatever, you start playing volleyball or you start playing racquetball or something, and then you take a racquetball to the eye, and then you wear an eye patch, and then everyone thinks you're tough, and then people want to know how tough, and then you end up in a roadside ditch. Yeah, and that whole thing, that idea that one little stupid thing like your cable going out will lead to you landing in a roadside ditch. Okay, well, that's a slippery slope argument. The idea that one thing automatically leads to all these other things. Okay. But again, the caution on this one is to treat everything that comes along as 100% this, or you're like, in other words, saying that never happens is the converse of this argument. And I find that really off-putting, to be honest with you, sometimes. Okay. There's sometimes when there is a slippery slope, sometimes there isn't. And some people will say, hey, this is a slippery slope argument because this won't lead to that. And that may very well be true. Other times they know good and well that this will lead to other things, but they try to put you down for believing that by saying that you're believing in a slippery slope. That to me just kind of bothers me. Okay. So just be aware of that. Be aware that that this one is used kind of both ways. All right. You'll be accused of doing a slippery slope even when you're not sometimes. Circular reasoning. This one, you rarely run into someone who uses this because it is so dumb when it happens. You're just kind of like, wait, what? They will base their argument. Oh, just a minute. Somebody's calling me. Ridiculous. Sorry about that. How unprofessional of me. Yeah. Circular reasoning. They'll start their foundation of their argument here. They will say, this is true. Okay. They will move on to the next point of their argument. This is point number 2. We'll call this point number 1, I guess. And then that obviously says that this is true. Point number 3. Great. Therefore, this is true. The idea is this was their foundational piece. Because this is true, then this is true. All right, cool. Because this is true, then this is true. Therefore, this is true. Wait, what? This is what you based your foundation on. Now, again, I can't even come up with really good examples of this because it's so dumb. Now, once in a while in a philosophy class, you'll hear someone say something and you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense at all. But the place that this comes into the most play for me is in Excel, crazy enough. So in Excel, and it doesn't happen very often because fortunately, I don't screw these up too bad. Here's some numbers. Let's say I want to find the average of these numbers. Oops, come on, if you learn how to spell, it would work, Jay. Let's find the average of these numbers, but watch what I did. I found the average of the first 5 numbers. Well, wait a minute. The average is in the 5th cell. How are you going to do that? It's a good question, Jay. I don't know. So when I hit enter, I get this error and it says there are 1 or more circular references here. Okay. The idea is I cannot find the average of these 5 numbers until I know what this number is. But this number is where the average is supposed to be. What the heck? And that's exactly what the computer is saying. You're a moron, dum-dum. And when I hit OK here, it'll, sometimes it will. Oh, well, it doesn't do it, I guess. Typically, it'll draw this weird blue line up and down, a vertical line. And it goes, dude, you cannot have this be the answer to what is the average of these 5 numbers, including this number here. And so that's where I see this one the most often. Once in a while, you'll see it in programming in general. It'll pop up. But again, it is so patently stupid and obvious that even most people that are even not the brightest don't do it a lot in a personal argument situation. Once in a while in a philosophy class, I remember back in the day we had I never took very many philosophy things. It was just there was a part of a philosophy class, and this one professor based her argument on whatever it was, and then when she got all done, I'm like, well, you just proved what you started out saying the first time. And I remember that was like when I quit really getting into philosophy. I remember that was the dumbest thing I ever heard of. And obviously her argument was poor, and I'm sure there's better arguments for what she was trying to say, but she set it up kind of poorly. I'm like, that didn't make any sense to me. And that's when I remember going philosophy. Yeah, I'm not going to really get into that too much. That was like maybe freshman year of college. But again, this doesn't happen very often in my interpersonal relationships, and maybe it does for you, but it doesn't to me very often. And again, if I could come up with a better example of that one, I would share it with you. You can look them up online and see them, but they're so contrived and dumb typically that it's like, well, I don't really get that. It's just kind of weird. So again, I see it more in a programming and in a true logic situation there. Hasty generalization is another one that is, this one happens all the time, all around me. Yes, I've done it, sure. This one is not to be confused with women's intuition, okay? Not to be confused. They are separate entities. I don't understand women's intuition. I just know it's a thing, okay? So years ago, the wife, we were meeting some people, and she goes, that guy creeps me out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And later on, found out, yeah, he's kind of a creep. All right, yeah. But that didn't stop me. So then some years later, there was another guy. That guy gives me the weird vibe. I don't like it. Well, I taught his daughter. I knew his family, his wife, and his kids, and whatever. And pretty nice people. He was a cop here in town. Well, he's with the sheriff's office. And he and I used to hang out once in a while, get a coffee, sit around, talk, whatever. And, whatever. I liked the guy. We were friends, whatever. And then he gets arrested. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was, let's see, he was molesting his daughter. He was doing stuff, crooked stuff, horrible crooked stuff as a cop. He went to prison, as he should have. And I was really blown away because you had no idea. I mean, I had no idea the guy was like that. None. Nobody did. And it was just mind blowing to me. And my wife at the end, I'm like, dang it, you're right. So I don't question it anymore. I don't know. I don't get it. But by the same token, I'm not going to argue that. That's not what we're talking about here. Okay. The idea that you are quick to judge something or someone. Okay. Based on limited knowledge or experience. All right. Okay. So let's say this one time you had the flu. Okay. And I don't know. Well, I tell one in high school. We weren't allowed to play in the game if we missed school. So this one time I had the flu. I was sicker than a dog. I slept pretty much all day in the back room of the shop, but I was at school. They couldn't tell I wasn't at school. I went to practice. practice hard. At the end of practice, I remember throwing up through my face mask. It sticks with me the rest of the day. Does not stick with me. I remember being in the shop sleeping. Went home, slept like a baby, got up the next morning right as rain. Um, to say that that's the way to cure the flu is probably goofy. And I would never say that that's the way to cure the flu. It happened once for me. I have one time where it worked. We need more than that. Okay. So I had this one boss one time. She called me out for being late to a meeting. Um, that was the only time I've ever been late to a meeting since I've been working here. And she started ragging on me. And it was the very first time like she'd ever met me. That was our very first experience together. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm late to a meeting one time in my career and you don't even know me as a person. Are you kidding me? And she was kind of saying things like, you're one of those people. And I'm like, just back up. Back up. You don't even know who I am. You don't even know what happened today. I had a flat tire on the way to work, and that's why I'm late. And I'm a whopping 3 minutes late. So, whatever. Things like that. We do this all the time. Some of us are worse at it than others. You'll have a bad experience with someone or some store, and you write them off. What was the bad experience? Well, I didn't like their customer service today. Oh, okay. What does that mean, that they're bad? No, not necessarily. You could have got someone who's having a bad day. You could have got a bad customer service representative, but that doesn't mean that they're all bad or the store is terrible. So the idea that you just write them off from one experience, it's kind of weird. Again, we all do this to some degree. Some of us are worse at it than others. Okay, but just be aware of that. The idea that you can just generalize the entire store as bad, you can generalize this person is bad based on a very short experience, it's kind of weird. Okay, so just be aware of that one. This one does come up. The idea is hasty, that you're making conclusions based on very little data. That's where the problem lies. That's where the logical fallacy plays in. There are some people at my job that if you told me that you had some bad experience with them, I'd say, yeah, because I've worked with them for 22 years. And yeah, you're right. How they still have their job. I don't want to talk about how they still have their job. It pisses me off thinking about it. And I don't mean at PCC, I mean at high school. And it's just crazy. But I know that because I have 22 years of working with them. I've seen them. And the idea that someone would judge them or be upset about it or whatever doesn't bother me at all. But if it's the first time you've ever been around them and you're making judgments, well, maybe you should watch and see. Again, the fallacy comes into play when you take just a very limited experience and then judge them. Okay, write them off, make a statement about them. That's where the problem lies. Okay, but again, women's intuition seems like the same, but it's not. So don't be aware. Just be aware of that. The red herring. Okay. This is the idea of changing the subject. That idea that you're going to subtly slip something in there. And so instead of talking about this, all of a sudden we're down this other rabbit trail. Okay. This is probably the one that I struggle with probably more than anything else. Okay. You get in a discussion with someone, as my friend calls it, when his wife's and them are in a fight. Like they're straight up having a fight. And he goes, yeah, well, Donna and I had a discussion. I'm like, dude, I've seen your guys' discussions. You never say anything, Donna. And I used to work with her. She's a super nice lady. And that's how I got to know him. But occasionally they'll just go at it when I'm there and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm uncomfortable now. But anyway, it's funny because he never says a word. He sits there and he just, normally he's wrong. And it's funny. We had a discussion. Okay. But it's the idea that as you're going along and you're having an argument back and forth about whatever it is, one of you will slightly change the subject. And then the next thing you know, you're fighting about something else. Okay. Could be something as simple as this. You're talking about something that you did wrong. And the next thing you know, you're having an argument about your parents or her parents or something else. And you're like, wait, how did we get onto this topic? And it's very subtle. And you go back, sometimes you can't even see who changed the subject per se. All of a sudden, the next thing you know is like, how are we talking about this? I've read tons of relationship books back in the day. And this is one I always talk about. Know what you're fighting about or stay on topic when you're fighting. That's what they're saying. Avoid these red herrings. Avoid the temptation to chase the red herring, if you will. Supposedly this came about as a red herring with the dog off the scent and they would go on a different trail following a different scent. That's technically what this is about. When you're done, you, after you've changed the subject, then you win the argument about the new problem, but you didn't win the argument about the initial problem. That's how this thing is. That's where the logical fallacy comes into play, because once you've changed the subject and we're fighting about this now, the other person wins, you lost, and you're like, oh, I lost. They're gloating because they won, but they didn't really win because they didn't destroy your argument. They destroyed some other argument that we weren't talking about to start with. Okay, this is the one I think I see. This one and probably the straw man are the two that I see almost every day in a discussion with somebody that I'm talking to somebody. One of these things will happen if it's a heated argument about something. Okay. Sometimes again, it's very sly, and it's not because we are doing it to one another on purpose necessarily. It's that idea that, you know, you kind of inside, you don't want to be the one that's wrong, or you want to be the loser in the deal, right? And so that's where these things kind of pop up. Okay. Again, very subtle. You just be careful of them, kind of guard yourself against them. Appeal to authority. Is another one. Okay. And typically what we mean by this is kind of a false authority thing. If you've seen Canon, Sony has a video, Sony has several commercials with like Timberlake and Peyton Manning and some of them, and about their cameras, and the idea that you know, these guys know about cameras because they get their pictures taken a lot. Okay, so it's kind of a false authority situation. Mostly it's appealed to like a false authority. They're set up as authorities, but they're not real authorities. Okay, so if you're listening to doctors about something, and about something medical, well, okay, that makes sense. Sometimes this comes into play in a goofy sort of way, like back in the 50s and 60s, they talk about, hey, more doctors smoke Camel cigarettes than any other cigarettes. That doesn't mean they're good for you just because a doctor says so. Okay. But if a doctor says you should do this, this, and this, if you have, you know, let's say cancer or whatever, well, then that's what you should do. You should listen to an authority figure on the deal. Peyton Manning doesn't know about cameras just because he gets his picture taken a lot, though. That doesn't mean that he's an authority figure on it just because he is the subject of being pictured. So this one, another one like this is very similar. Is, you know, 3 out of 5 dentists surveyed to recommend Trident or whatever that one was back in the day, things of this nature. Again, appealing to an authority figure. You would think dentists would know about gum. I'm not sure dentists care about gum. But yeah, you'd think they would know, so you appeal to them. It wouldn't make sense to appeal to a bartender for what kind of gum to use. That doesn't make sense at all. But if, I don't know, appeal to a cook, if you appeal to a chef, maybe if there's something about, you know, our chefs prefer this brand of salt or whatever. Okay, that would be an authority figure. Whether they actually recommend this version of salt or that version of salt, at least they are, you know, an authority in theory in that matter, just like the doctors saying you should smoke Camel cigarettes. But again, it can be one of two ways: either quoting an authority or suggesting that authority prefers this or that, makes it better, again with the Camel cigarettes, or in the case of a false authority figure, someone who's had a lot of pictures taken, like Peyton Manning, of him, therefore he's an opinion, or he's an authority on cameras. Okay, that's typically how this one goes. Again, this one is done a lot when it comes to marketing and sales. Not a lot done in politics in this regard. Not a lot done in your interpersonal relationships. It would just be weird. Well, you know, I'm doing it this way because the dentists say, it's just weird. I don't know. I can't get in a heated discussion about that. If we were having a discussion about what kind of potting soil to use, and she appeals to the local gardening club and they like Black Magic potting soil, I don't care. It's really hard to get excited about these things if you're not emotionally invested in it. Okay, if you're not I don't care what potting soil we use for the tomatoes. Just get some potting soil that works. But I'm not going to be emotionally invested in it. You're not going to have me argue with you about it. I just forget about it. It's not important to us. And again, that if you go back to this, every single one of these, when it comes down to it, is either about marketing and sales, or it's about, you know, winning. You can see the winning structure in it. There's the idea of you winning. Okay. But the problem is these are all fallacies because you're throwing logic out the window and you're saying, let's just appeal. Let's get some sort of other way to win. Okay. So we don't have to like actually win the argument. logically and defeat it logically. We just want to win. Okay, that's what all of these things are. Okay. Court of law, of course, is all about logic. You know, when you're presenting your case, that's the whole point of it. Not to say there isn't emotion in there. Of course there always is, and there always is in that case. But you can't. I can't say you can't. Most of the time, you can't win a lawsuit based on truly just pure emotion and not facts. Okay. So there's another one that's really close to this one that I really like, and that's appeal to emotion. What is wrong with this pen? Interesting. Oopsie daisy. Now I did it. And my pen doesn't want to write. Awesome. Okay, well, the next one is appeal to emotion. Maybe we'll just type that out. I think we'll just type it out. How about that? Apparently my pen hates me. And oh no. One moment, please. I'm gonna open a new Word document. Cool. So appeal to emotion. Okay. Typically, this one happens like you're having a discussion with someone. This one happens all the time on some hot button topics. Okay. So pick your favorite hot button topic. It could be anything. It could be abortion. It could be racism. It could be illegal immigration. It could be any number of things. Doesn't matter. Okay. And someone in discussion with that, someone will always go, "It's not fair. I feel like," or whatever it happens to be. Okay. Now, there are a zillion ways that you could put together an argument to support this case or that case, facts, figures, statistics, whatever. But instead of those, or if someone presents something, you're like, "I don't really feel that way. I hear some counter arguments to that." Instead of that, if your go-to is just to say, "Well, that's not fair, that's mean, that's whatever," all right, then what you're saying is that I'm not going to, or I can't refute your statistics, facts, and figures. I'm going to instead go straight for the emotional aspect of it. Okay. Now, again, there are things that are just plain wrong, and you could beat them with facts, figures, and logic. But if you don't, if you cut straight to things like, "That's not fair, I feel like, it's mean, it's this, it's that, it's whatever," and you never actually dismantle the argument, you didn't win. Now, you might win hearts and minds of, well, mostly hearts of other people, because you're appealing to their emotional state, but you're not actually going to win an argument long term unless you can actually present facts, figures, and whatnot. That's how that thing kind of goes. It also happens when it comes to sales. In this case, I remember back in the 80s, maybe early 90s as well, you would see, they would always put on these people who are very, like, for instance, the starving kids in Africa, whatever. And you should be touched by that. Okay. But the idea wasn't so much that, you're trying to do this or that. You're trying to appeal strictly to your emotional senses. Okay. And that idea that your emotions are connected straight to your checkbook, right? It's a check kind of a thing. Okay. So just be aware of that. This one will happen from time to time, but it's almost always on a hot button issue. Okay. Someone will present a facts, figures, and statements. And instead of actually, if the other person, like you see this on TV a lot, like between a couple of different politicians or whatever it happens to be, news media and a politician, whatever, instead of attacking and saying, "Listen, here, I take your figures, I don't buy that because," or "Here's a different set of figures that says opposite of what you're saying." Okay. No, my argument is strictly based on, that's not fair, that's not right, that's mean, that's whatever it is. Now, again, some things are just moral, and that's just all there is to it, right? This is a moral, immoral situation. Great, that's fine. But you can also, but we're talking about if something is built strictly on logic. Again, go back to a court case situation. Okay. If you can show that this person did this, and this, which is against the law, boom, you win. Cool. As a prosecutor. If you just go in there and you don't try to present, they did this, 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 and this, therefore, because they broke the law, they go to jail. If you go in there and you just emote to the judge and the jury, and that's all you do, you're not going to win a case as a prosecutor. You can't do it that way. You actually have to present facts and figures. Okay. So again, not saying there isn't a time for emotions, because Lord knows there is. Okay. Not saying there isn't a time for morals versus immorality, because there is, totally. And matter of fact, I probably would go off more on that if I could. But again, logical fallacy piece is this: we're going to replace facts, figures, arguments, real stuff, hands-on, you can touch it things. Again, try to stick to the court of law situation. That's really where this piece comes in at. If you replace those facts, figures, and arguments with, well, I feel like, an emotional business, that's where you run into logical fallacy, because you cannot win the court case based on that. Okay. So again, all of these things, I mean, I would argue that in my interpersonal relationships, I probably struggle more being logical, because the emotional aspect takes over, which is weird for me to say that, but it's true. And I find that really annoying a little bit at times, because I like to think of myself as semi-logical, but I know that I'm not. I just know that about myself sometimes. Things that I'll see a friend go through and a friend do, and then I'm like, dude, you should do this, this, and this. If I were on the outside of my situation, sometimes looking in, I'd be like, you're an idiot. Do this and this and this. Follow your own advice. Physician, heal thyself. But no, because I go to emotions sometimes, and that's just how it is. We all are like that. Okay. Appeal to no, what's the other one here? Oh, I almost forgot about that one. Bandwagon. Okay, bandwagon / popularity. Classic. It is. Everyone's doing it, Mom. All right. So whether we're doing this back when we're like in the 6th grade, everyone's doing it, Mom. I want to be popular too. Okay. Or whether it's the latest, greatest fad that's sweeping Portland, whether it's, whatever it happens to be that every person nowadays in the Portland vicinity is into. Okay. We all want to be on the winning team. Okay. We all want to do, whatever it happens to be. Obviously, you can think of back in the day, why'd you start smoking? Well, because everyone was doing it when I was in 7th grade or whatever. Okay. That idea that, you want to be on the winning team. I want to vote for this candidate because he's the winner or she's the winner. Okay. But there's facts over here. No, I want to be on the winning side of this argument. Okay. This one, again, doesn't happen a ton. Well, not a ton in politics sometimes, but more often than not, it happens in our personal stuff. Again, that idea that I want to win, I want to be popular, I want to feel like I'm part of the cool kids, whatever. Even if this particular thing I'm doing is not safe, cool, it's hazardous to my health, whatever it happens to be, this one is fairly common in that regard. It's also, the whole reason that places like Costco kind of exist, right? Because everybody that goes to Costco has the same 25, 30 items that they buy there that are like the, whatever items that, whether it's this kind of pants or whether it's this kind of this sofa lawn chair outfit, whether it's the seltzer hard alcohol things, whatever, whatever it happens to be that all of a sudden everyone's into, and then it goes by the wayside, and then it's the next thing that comes along. And some people you actually talk to them about like different coffees. I remember back in the day when coffee was just barely becoming a thing, and you talking about it, did you really like it? Well, not really, but I mean it's kind of cool, but and like, well, then why you drink it? Well, and they wouldn't say it, but it's kind of in essence that it's kind of the cool thing to do now. Okay. Just be aware that we're not immune to it. It's not a 6th grade only kind of a situation. Okay. Appeal to tradition and its counterpart, which is the Barney Stinson one. It doesn't really have a name. I just like to refer to it as the Barney Stinson proposition. These are the opposite sides of the same coin. Appeal to tradition is the way we've always done it. Or if you prefer, or newer, or I'm sorry, older ways are always better. Okay, versus Barney, which is always newer. New is always better. Okay, those are two sides of the same coin. Okay, just because we've been doing something for years doesn't make it the best way to do it. Maybe we're just stuck doing it that way. Okay, other times, other people are just like it's constantly newer is always better. Newer is better is always a thing in education. Every other year, somebody comes in, somebody wrote a book. Now we're going to do this for a while. Oh, okay, cool. It's dumb. It doesn't work. Hey, we should try this. So my boss for next year, I am not making this up. Like 8 years ago, we got rid of our perfect block schedule. We met 4 periods one day, 4 the next. We actually refer to them as lemon and black schedule days because that's our high school colors out here. And the other day, she has an idea for next year in the fall. We're going to have this cool schedule. We're going to have 8 periods. We're going to have 4 one day and 4 the next day. And we're going to call them, and no joke, she called lemon and black. I'm like, you're just screwing with us now, aren't you? And she acted like it was her brand spanking new. No one's ever thought of this before. The idea that, there's always going to be something new or is going to be better than what we're doing currently. Guess why we're on the schedule we're on now? Because back then, the lady we had back then, as our superintendent, she wanted to save money. So she said, we're going to scrap this stupid block schedule and we're going to go to the 7 period day. And it's going to be great. Like, you mean 7 periods like people have done for years? No, that's just different. Well, it's the same 7 periods. Oh, wow. And we're going to save money. And I said, well, are you going to fire teachers? And she said, no. And I said, well, then how are you going to save money? Am I still teaching 6 classes? She said, yeah. And I said, well, you have still the same number of teachers? Yeah. Same number of kids? Yeah. Well, the same number of kids divided by the same number of periods, it comes out the same amount of kids per period. And she's like, well, I think you're doing math wrong. I'm like, please, lady. And so we've had all these discussions over the years where people come in and, oh, we're going to put a new idea in. This is a new idea. This can be better. It's going to be better. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not. Older ways aren't always better either. Just because we've been doing something forever and ever and ever doesn't make it better. All right. Some things are great. Like, for instance, if you're a person who's into old woodworking, boy, they made some really cool stuff out of wood back in the day. And I think some of their stuff, it was better than our traditional. It's traditional. It's better wood. It's better ways of making things. Obviously, it took a lot longer, a lot more craftsmanship involved. And I would argue that is probably a better, table from 150 years ago. It's probably better quality than what you're making today, for sure. And yeah, you can't argue that. So, but the problem lies where always comes into play. Older ways are not always better. Newer is not always better. Okay, that is not true. That's where the logical fallacy happens here. Okay, so trying to improve, that's great. Taking what used to be and trying to tweak it and make it a little better, yeah, that's the whole name of the game. Going back to the old ways of doing things, that might help part way. But again, it's always tweaking. It's saying, and so knowing what's good, knowing what's bad, keeping the good stuff, getting rid of some of the other stuff, that's what it's all about. And you got to remember that when it comes to these fallacies. Always is a huge deal. Of course, so is never. Always and never. That's where you run into problems. That's not to say there's not black and white, because there is black and white. There are things that are right and wrong. That's a fact. But again, as soon as you just throw out there a blanket statement, older is always better or newer is always better, that's where your problem runs into play. Budweiser does a lot of marketing, for instance, around the idea of appeal to tradition. We have been Beechwood age since whatever, whatever it is. The idea that they can make a better beer. I'm going to plug this computer in. They can make a better beer because they've been doing it since, whenever, and they use this old way of doing things, which may or may not be better. But that's the appeal to the traditional person in you who says, oh yeah, the older craft ways of doing it are the better ways of doing it. And so just be aware that's where the fallacies come into play is when you say always and when you say never. Okay. One more, and we will call it a day on these. I think, again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is one that these are some that I think are pretty important. We see them on our daily basis. Again, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in politics, or whether it's in our personal lives. Equivocation is the idea of saying two things are the same. Okay. And so the idea of you're equivocating when you're saying that, hey, this bad thing over here, it's just as bad as this other bad thing over here. Or trying to say that it's better than this bad thing over here. You're trying to say that, hey, what these people are doing and what these people are doing, They're the same. They may or may not even be bad. For instance, this one happens a lot in politics. Some years ago, back when the war on terror was going strong, somebody would condemn Islam, and so then there would always be well, what about the Crusades? Okay, and it's that idea of you hearkening back to something in the past, or you're trying to compare it to some other religion, for instance. Someone will judge you. You then will say, well, how is that any different than what you did over here? Trying to say that instead of saying, listen, instead of taking what you're saying, if someone says that what you're doing is wrong, instead of either trying to defend what you're doing or actually being honest and looking and saying, am I doing something wrong here? You try to equivocate that, or you try to equivalency that to what they're doing over here. Okay, how is that different than what you're doing? Okay, the fallacy lies with that is that instead of actually looking at what was asked about, okay, so let's say maybe in the case of Islam, actually looking at that and saying, okay, well, maybe there's a problem here. Instead of looking at it, the people would say, well, yeah, okay, but what about this? Okay, well, that's where the fallacy lies. If someone points out something in your life that may be wrong, instead of being honest with yourself and saying, is there a problem with what I'm doing here? You go over there and point a finger at them and say, well, yeah, but what about this over here? Okay, that's where the fallacy lies in it. Okay, you didn't destroy their argument. You threw a rock back at them in essence. Okay, and so these are the things, these are some of the ones that I think are some of the more important ones. On the test, I will either write up a short little 4 or 5 sentence thing, or I will give you a link to a video. In class, I normally just play a couple of videos and say, what is this video showing an example of? Is it a red herring? Or I won't give you the examples. You'll have this list, and you're more than welcome to use the list, of course, on the test. What is this video showing you? Is it showing you an example of, say, a red herring? Is it an example of appeal to emotion? I like to try to pick ones that have about 4 or 5 possibilities in it, okay? So that when you look at them, you go, oh, well, I see this in it. And I won't give you full credit on the test unless you actually state something to the effect of, well, I see this because of blah, 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 okay? If you just pick one out and I'm not going to give you credit for it. If someone said to me that someone might have said, listen, I in that one I heard bandwagon, I also heard appeal to tradition, I heard maybe some appeal to emotion. Oh, okay. And then you explain why you did. I'd be perfectly happy with that if you explain it and it makes sense. Sometimes it won't be true. Like, that, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good one. Well, like that car commercial where the cable company commercial where the guy ends up in a roadside ditch. If you said that was hasty generalization, boy, I'd have a hard time buying that one. I'd have a really hard time buying that idea that that I don't know how you could explain that one and make me believe that one. Or if you said it was appeal to authority. But if you said it was a slippery slope, or it could be in a false dilemma, either get DirecTV or you don't, you could probably sell me on that one, maybe. It's not ad hominem attacks, so I don't care. You could explain it all day long. It's just wrong. That's not wrong. It's not right. But there's 3 or 4 maybe that you could then, but that's just the way you saw it and heard it. I'd probably be okay with that. So I've never done this test online before, so my guess is I'll probably have a link to a video for you to watch. That's probably how I'll do it, but that's kind of where we'll go from there. As far as the test goes, the review is online. And let's bring it up here real quick. Maybe I will. I'm not going to go through the review on it other than to say that this test is a cumulative test. And so I have to put on stuff from the first part of the term. That's how it has to be done. I wouldn't do that if I could get away with it, because I find it, I don't know, it just seemed like a complete waste of time talk sometimes about that. Where's the final? Right here. There it is. And but I have to do that because that's part of my thing. So you can see these are the same basic problems we had from the midterm on the first couple there. And then it's probability stuff that we'll talk about. Okay. There you go. Probability stuff, probabilities, more probability. Oh, look, here's some statistics and probability stuff, right? Because this is statistics, and then you're going to use them to answer these questions. I'm not going to probably have you do a pivot table on the test. I will probably just give you a pivot table on the test. I think that's probably the easier way to do it. I haven't decided yet because I haven't written it yet. I'll probably do it this weekend. If I do, I may have you do a pivot table. Maybe, I will see. But I for sure will give you a table like this. Here's some more probability. Then there'll be some graphs. What's wrong with this graph, or describe what's happening in this graph. Here's another one. This 2012. Look at that. Who? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Google a lot bigger now. Things like this. This all statistics stuff here. Oh, by the way, it's one of my favorite questions of all time. Ice cream sales go up when people wear less clothes. Casual or causal? Well, it's casual relationship, obviously. The sun coming out obviously makes people wear less clothes. They obviously can feel like buying more ice cream. This is kind of the hasty generalization thing I talk about. If I don't put a video on, this is the kind of thing I like to talk about. Your grandpa lived to be 95 and he smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, so they must not be bad for you. Okay. I'd probably call that hasty generalization more than anything else, because your grandpa is a one data point. It's not everybody. So if you track a lot of people, they don't make it to age 95. So yeah, cool. So you're talking about these on the truth tables. So, writing out the contrapositives and the inverse and the converses. All that is on the review, which is, I think, up there. The review key is already posted. If it isn't, I'll post it up. Venn diagram. Okay. There'd be two bubbles here that I really would be interested in. I'd probably be interested in mouth cancer and a bubble for chewing tobacco. And I'd probably be interested in where they overlap. It's probably my guess. If you don't chew tobacco and you have mouth cancer, you're Michael Douglas. That's interesting, but most people that have mouth cancer have been chewing tobacco. So that's kind of a big deal. And people that don't have mouth cancer are not really interested in you, because I'm a oncologist. I'm probably interested more in people who actually have cancer. Notice that there's not a box around this Venn diagram, because everybody I asked owns a game console, and it owns one of these 3 game consoles. And when I made this up, I couldn't think of another game console that someone could have. So I could have had like an Atari 2600 out here, and there'd been one poor sap out here that has that, I guess. Yeah. Now, again, on the final, this particular version of the final I just gave you here does not have a pivot table aspect to it. I mean, it has the pivot table that I gave you, but I may or may not on the test make you do a pivot table off to the side. Okay. On the test, they're on the test though. There will be some. There may or may not be some graphs like we did on the previous test. There could also be that situation. So I don't know that I will, but I'm not opposed to that either. Having you make a probably not a histogram, like a pie chart, time series graph. I'm not opposed to doing that. It would be about 20. What is this one here? This one is 27, 28 questions long. The test is probably going to be somewhere around that neighborhood. Okay, lengthwise, you'll have 3 hours to do it next Saturday morning from 8 to 11, and then I need to have it turned in by 11:30. So you could work on it right up till the end if your internet's good and you feel like you're no way you're not going to turn it in late. But I want it done. You have 3 hours to work on it, plus like a half an hour to turn it in. Okay. And again, I'll go double check that the key is up. If it's not up, I'll make sure it gets put up so you can double check yourself. It's fairly straightforward though. That's kind of what the test will look like. And that's pretty much what it'll be in terms of, you're going to see it's mostly probability with some statistics. But the statistics will be very general questions. Things like, if you want to test this, is there a placebo or whatever it happens to be. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions like, what is a placebo? Because, Google, what is a placebo? Copy, paste. I never do those kind of questions anyways. Even if you were in class, I wouldn't ask them that way. I ask them, I want you to be able to look at a situation and apply the stuff that we've talked about in class. Okay. So that's what I've got for today. Anybody have any questions this time? My 2 little hairs are sticking up funny.
Hey Jay, what is the post hoc discussion? It looks like there's not any info on that.
Oh, it never got put up. Oof. Oh, I'll put that up today too. It'll just be a quick response where, geez, I wonder why that didn't post. Anyway, it'll be a quick discussion where, remember that book I had you read for the graph? There's a chapter in that about post hoc, and it just talks about post hoc is another one of the logical fallacies, and it's the idea of assigning blame to something which may or may not have caused it. One of the classic examples is on the Big Bang Theory when Sheldon, would he catch a cold or something, and his mom, or no, he didn't die on the trip or whatever, and it's because his mom prayed for him or something, and then he said that's basically he used the longer Latin version of it, but it's post hoc. He attributed she was attributing cause to something that didn't necessarily cause the event. My friend is really good at that. He will always get sick about every winter. And then about every winter, when he does that, he'll take about a week off of work and he'll go to the doctor and he'll always get medicine for whatever it is, doesn't matter. And then he'll come home but he'll end up sleeping for about a week. But you cannot convince him, and he's a very brilliant guy. He works for Boeing, he designs airplanes. You cannot convince him that taking a week off and sleeping like 15 hours a day, you cannot convince him that that had more to do with him getting better. It's always about the medicine with him. Okay. And that's just kind of how he rolls. And so there'll be a little blurb to read about, and then give me an example from your daily life. So not very hard to do. It's in essence, it's taking two independent events and trying to make one as if it were causing the other one. In other words, trying to create a dependent relationship there. So I'll get that posted right after class. Sorry about that. Anybody else? Yep, no, maybe. All right. Well, if you have not yet sent me your information on your simulation, please get that done today or at the latest tomorrow, especially if you need help for me generating your numbers for you. And then get back to me so that we can do that. I responded to a couple people last night, so make sure you check your email about that. One person, almost perfect. I think they're looking at just a little backwards. So I want to clarify that before I spend time generating the numbers. Okay. All right. Have a great day then. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.